cold wind from Massachusetts Bay swept through the North Star Aeronautics plant in Everett. The roar of jet engines filled the air, and fuel smoke curled through the gray winter afternoon. Caleb Hartley knelt on the concrete floor, a rag in his hand as he wiped oil stains beneath an engine stand. Sweat ran down his cheek despite the cold. The old back injury flared again, a souvenir from the accident 7 years ago. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Every hour here meant rent, a meal for his daughter, a fragile hope that tomorrow might hurt a little less than today. Above him, along the steel walkway, a group of executives approached. The sound of high heels striking metal echoed like the rhythm of a heartless machine. Charlotte Sinclair, 32, the CEO of North Star, walked at the center of 3 senior directors, all in black suits, with the sharp eyes of people used to commanding rather than listening. Charlotte stopped, looking down from the railing. Her gaze swept across the factory floor like a general inspecting her battlefield. She spotted Caleb, the faded blue uniform, oil-stained hands, body bent low, trying to disappear into the cold geometry of the industrial world around him. Careful, Charlotte's voice carried down, cold as the wind outside. Don't touch anything you don't have the qualifications to understand. Jet engines aren't made for people who only know how to mop floors. A muffled giggle. Then more laughter followed. A silver-haired director with gold-rimmed glasses burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the plant like a public slap in the face. Caleb stayed still. He didn't look up. He didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on the rag and waited for them to pass. His eyes drifted toward the F-47 Phantom Strike behind the bulletproof glass, a masterpiece of technology North Star had poured billions into. That world, behind the glass, had once been his, the sky, the clouds, the freedom. Now all that remained was the cold ground, and his calloused hands. Charlotte and her entourage disappeared down the corridor. The echo of heels faded, replaced by the familiar noise of engines, metal, and the distant murmur of engineers. Caleb exhaled slowly, but something stayed stuck in his chest. Not anger. He was used to contempt. It was sadness. The sadness of a man who once soared 30,000 feet above the earth, now kneeling on concrete. Behind the glass, the F-47 shimmered under the lights. On its wing was a small inscription, "For those who dare to fly." Caleb stared at it for a long moment and wondered, what about those who used to fly? The ones who fell? What happens to them? But he said nothing. He just bowed his head and went back to work. At the corner of the hangar, his 8-year-old daughter, Isla, sat with a sketchbook in her lap, a pencil in hand, her eyes glowing each time a plane took off. For her, he could endure anything. For her, he could kneel on any ground. For her, he could lose everything. Except hope. If you too believe that sometimes the quietest people carry the most extraordinary stories, hit subscribe to follow Caleb's journey. The man who once touched the clouds, now learning how to rise again from the ground. But does Charlotte Sinclair truly know who the man she just insulted really is? Boston, Massachusetts. The 40-story glass and steel tower of North Star Aeronautics rose above the financial district, a cold declaration of power. 40th floor, CEO's office. Charlotte Sinclair stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, staring down at the city now drowned in darkness. It was 11 p.m., and she was still here, as she had been every night since her father died, 6 months ago. Edward Sinclair, founder of North Star, the king of the defense aviation industry. He had taught Charlotte that weakness was a sin. emotion an enemy of success, and that a leader must learn to stand alone at the top. Charlotte grew up in that world. Diplomatic dinners where her father shook hands with generals, flights to Washington for lobbying meetings, billion-dollar contracts signed in glass-walled rooms. She still remembered being 10. Sitting in this very office, watching her father fire a senior director for lacking strategic vision. The man had worked 25 years. He cried. Her father did not. "Do you see?" he said. "In business, there's no room for compassion. Compassion makes you weak, and the weak get crushed." Charlotte nodded. She didn't understand back then, but she learned. She learned to keep her distance. She learned not to cry. She learned to turn her heart into steel. On her 16th birthday, her father was in Tokyo, negotiating a deal with Japan's self-defense forces. He didn't come home, didn't call. He only sent a curt message through his secretary. "Happy birthday. The contract matters more." That day, Charlotte cried, and it was the last time. Now she stood in the position he left behind, but the board didn't trust her. They looked at her, a 32-year-old woman, and saw weakness. They waited for her to stumble, for proof that she could be replaced by a more experienced man. So Charlotte became more ruthless than her father ever was. In her first month, she laid off 15% of the staff, cut every project that didn't yield instant profit, and demanded 70-hour work weeks. No excuses, no justifications. Every night, she stood before the mirror in her private restroom, practicing not to tremble, practicing not to let anyone see fear in her eyes, practicing to become a wall of steel, cold, hard, perfect. But tonight, when the building had fallen silent, Charlotte felt tired. Tired of being strong, tired of not being allowed to be weak, tired of having no one to talk to. She looked down at her desk. A single old photograph, the only trace of memory in the sterile room. In the photo, her father stood beside a young pilot in a flight suit, both smiling for once. Her father had never told her the details of that day, only that the pilot saved my life during a test flight in Afghanistan. The plane malfunctioned. The man could have ejected, but chose to stay. He refused a medal, her father had said. He only said, "I was just doing my job, sir." Charlotte never knew his name. And when her father died, that secret was buried with him. She sighed, switched off the office lights, and went back to her cold penthouse, where she lived alone, with no voices, no shadows but her own. Dorchester, Boston, an old apartment building with peeling paint and creaking stairs. Unit 3B, 2 small bedrooms, a living room doubling as kitchen, no air conditioning. Caleb unlocked the door as the clock struck 7. Isla ran out, her black hair tied in a ponytail, face glowing. "Dad, I finished drawing the F-47. Caleb bent down and hugged her tight. His back flared with pain again, but he didn't care. That moment, that hug, was the best part of his day. "Let's see it." Isla pulled him into her room. On the table lay an open sketchbook. The drawing was astonishingly detailed. The engines, wing flaps, cockpit hatch, even the North Star logo on the fuselage. "You remembered everything," Caleb said, voice thick. Isla looked up, eyes sparkling. "Tell me more about the planes, Dad. About when you used to fly." Caleb sat beside her. He told her, as he did every night, about the white sea of clouds, the dawn sky painted purple and gold, the feeling when the wheels left the runway, when only freedom and wind remained. But he never told her about the battlefield. Not the sirens, not the screams of comrades over the radio, not the day he fell. Afghanistan, 7 years earlier, the Greyhawk Squadron was escorting a humanitarian convoy across the Kandahar Mountains. Caleb was the squad leader. 4 F-16s flew in diamond formation. Then Lieutenant Marcus Reed's engine failed at 22,000 feet, right in the middle of a sandstorm. "Greyhawk lead! I've lost engine 2! Temperatures spiking. Need an emergency landing." The base radioed back. "Greyhawk lead! Abort mission! Sandstorm approaching. Survival rate under 20% if you're caught in it." Caleb looked down. The storm looked like a colossal wall devouring the sky. If he pulled out, he'd live. Reed would die. "Greyhawk 2-4, I'm staying with you," Caleb said. "Follow my lead down." "Lead? You can't." "Silence. That's an order." He broke formation, dove alongside Reed, guiding him through the blinding chaos. Sand lashed the windshield like bullets. Radar went wild. Finally, Reed crash-landed. Caleb exhaled, in relief for only a second. A surface-to-air missile launched from the desert. He dodged the first. The second struck his right wing. The plane spun violently. "Eject! Eject!" Caleb pulled the handle. The seat blasted free. The chute opened, but the storm hurled him into a cliff. The impact shattered his spine. The pain was fire. He lay there for 2 days, unable to move. The rescue team found him half dead. Reed survived. Caleb lost his wings. "Dad? Why'd you stop?" Isla's voice pulled him back to the present. He turned, forcing a smile. "Sorry, sweetheart. I was just remembering." "Were you thinking about Mom?" Caleb nodded. Sarah, the woman who had walked through rehab hell with him, who held his hand when he learned to stand again. She used to say, "You're still my hero, even if you can't fly." Then came cancer. He couldn't even hold her properly because of the back pain. She died when Isla was 4. "Your mom would be so proud," Caleb said softly, "because you're smart, kind, and brave, just like her." "And I'll fly like you, Dad," Isla said. "You'll teach me, right?" Caleb looked at her, his 8-year-old with dreams bigger than the sky. How could he teach her to fly when even dinner required counting every dollar? But he still smiled. "I'll teach you. Somehow." That night, after Isla fell asleep, Caleb stood by the small window, gazing at the Boston sky. Airplane lights flickered faintly above the clouds. He remembered the feel of the joystick, the roar of the engine, the moment the wheels left the ground. Now his feet only knew the earth. But maybe that too was a kind of flight. A flight through helping others rise. He touched the tattoo on his right arm. 2 steel wings with the words Greyhawk Squadron. He always kept it hidden under his sleeve. He didn't want pity. He didn't want questions. He just wanted to live, to raise his daughter, and to believe that one day little Isla would touch the sky he once lost. Tuesday afternoon, the North Star shop in Everett. Isla sat in the corner of the maintenance area, clutching her sketchbook, her legs swinging in a steady rhythm. She was sketching a jet engine from what she could see through the glass. About 3 meters away, Caleb bent beneath a test stand, wiping away oil. He always kept Isla within sight. The hangar was busy, but he trusted she wouldn't wander off. Still, curiosity pulled Isla to her feet. Far off, a door stood ajar, the restricted inspection area. Inside, a table was covered with engineering drawings. She glanced at her father. Caleb had his back turned, absorbed in work. Isla tiptoed through the opening, stepping lightly across the concrete. Cold fluorescent lights hummed. The room was wide and silent. On the table were technical drawings of the Aquila 9, North Star's most secret project. Isla didn't know how important they were. To her, they were simply beautiful lines, numbers, and symbols that looked like art. She sat down on the floor, pulled out an old blueprint she'd fished from a recycling bin, spread it out, and began to copy it carefully. Her small fingers traced each line. Her lips mouthed the words, combustion chamber pressure, fuel ratio, relief valve. Then the sound of high heels. Isla startled and looked up. Charlotte Sinclair stood in the doorway, eyes cold as ice. Behind her were two security officers and Gordon MacLeod, the 63-year-old chief engineer, holding a tablet and checking systems. "Who let this child in here?" Charlotte's voice tore through the air. Isla sprang up, clutching the blueprint to her chest, eyes wide with fear. I was just looking." "Looking?" Charlotte stepped closer. Her heels tapped like a hammer. "This is a classified area. These designs are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And who are you? A lost child wandering into places she shouldn't be?" She knelt to meet Isla's eye level, not to soothe, but to make the girl feel the weight of her anger. "Do you know about the plane behind that glass?" Charlotte pointed outside toward the prototype F-47 parked there. "It cost over $200 million. More than your parents will earn in a lifetime. More than your school. More than the home you live in." Isla slid back until her spine hit the table. Tears spilled from her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Didn't know?" Charlotte straightened, voice ice-hard. "Irresponsibility is not knowing. And irresponsibility has no place in this company." She turned to security. "Find the child's parents. File a security breach report." Gordon MacLeod stepped forward, his tone softening. "Ms. Sinclair, the child was only drawing. Perhaps what, Gordon?" Charlotte snapped, whipping her head around. Her gaze was a knife. "Perhaps we should let kids wander into classified areas. Perhaps security is a joke?" Gordon fell silent. He knew when not to argue. Then Caleb came running. He crossed the shop floor, heart pounding. Someone had reported his daughter in trouble. He didn't know what had happened. Only panic. Standing at the restricted area doorway, he saw Isla. "Sweetheart." Charlotte turned. Her eyes swept him from head to toe. His damp uniform, oil-stained hands, the mop he still held. "You the child's father?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. My daughter won't do it again. She infiltrated a classified area." Charlotte cut him off, her tone glacial. "A serious violation. And you, as an employee, are responsible for your child's behavior on company grounds." Caleb swallowed dryly. He understood what that meant. A security breach could mean termination. And he could not lose this job. "I am deeply sorry, Miss Sinclair. This is my fault. I should have supervised her better." "Should have?" Charlotte took a step closer. "Do you think 'should have' holds any weight here? We build fighter jets, not toys. A small mistake can kill dozens." She stopped in front of him and looked him straight in the eye. "You mop floors here. That is your job. Not to dream about the sky, and not to let your daughter play with things beyond your understanding." Her words hit Caleb like a punch to the chest. Not shame, he had grown used to contempt, but the painful truth that followed. He was just a janitor now, not a pilot, not a hero, not anything else. "You understand?" Charlotte asked. Caleb nodded without looking up. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." "Good. Remove your child from this area. Next time, keep her somewhere safe. The shop is not a playground." Caleb took Isla's hand. Her fingers trembled. He gently pried the blueprint from her and placed it back on the table. "Let's go, baby." They stepped out into the hangar. Eyes followed them. Some snickered. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. Gordon MacLeod watched them go, his face shadowed with sadness. He noticed how Caleb moved, each step slow and precise, like someone disciplined by the military. The way Caleb placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, protective, practiced. And he thought, this is not an ordinary janitor. But he did not speak. Not yet. Caleb led Isla to the parking lot. Night had fallen. Wind from the bay slapped their faces. Isla sobbed. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't know. I just wanted to look." Caleb knelt and hugged her. His back pain twisted like a knife, but he held tight. "It's okay, love. Daddy's not angry. I'm just scared you might get hurt." "But she said terrible things. She said you only mop floors." "She said I don't understand anything." Caleb inhaled deeply. Something inside him cracked. Not rage, but a deep sorrow. "Listen to me," he said softly. "There are people who measure a person by where they stand. They think if you're not up high, you have no worth." "But you used to fly. You were a pilot. Why don't you tell her?" Isla asked. Caleb looked into his daughter's eyes, dark, clear, full of hope and hurt. "Because a person's worth isn't what they once were, sweetheart. It's how they treat others when they fall. But that's not fair. Life isn't fair, baby, but we still live. We still love. We still dream." Caleb stood, took his daughter's hand, and led her toward the bus stop. Behind them in the shop, Charlotte Sinclair stood at the temporary office window, looking down at the parking lot. She saw Caleb and Isla, two small figures under the yellow lights, and for the first time, a strange feeling rose in her. Not exactly regret, more like a question. Was I right? She dismissed it. To lead, she told herself, you cannot question yourself. You must be resolute. You must be strong, even if that means stepping on others. Gordon MacLeod couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his small study in Cambridge, staring at the computer screen. Before him was an old photograph, taken 15 years ago at a military event at Pease Air National Guard Base, New Hampshire. That day had been a ceremony honoring the Greyhawk Squadron after a top-secret rescue mission in Afghanistan. Back then, Gordon was still an Air Force engineer in charge of fighter jet maintenance. He'd been invited because the squadron's aircraft used several of his own technical modifications. The photo was grainy under the hall lights, but Gordon remembered every face. 5 pilots stood in a line, flight suits crisp, medals gleaming. The man in the center was the squadron leader, Captain Caleb Hartley. Gordon zoomed in. The face was younger, unscarred, but the eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. Steady, calm, just as they were today. "Caleb Hartley," he murmured, "you're still alive." He remembered the news 2 years after that ceremony. Greyhawk had been reported missing on a classified mission in Afghanistan. No bodies, no official report. Just a brief statement from the Pentagon. The pilots perished in the line of duty. Yet in military circles, rumors persisted. Someone had survived. Badly injured, discharged quietly, erased from records for security reasons. Gordon had never known for sure. Until now. He looked again at the photo. On Captain Hartley's right arm, below the short sleeve, part of a tattoo was visible, 2 steel wings. And he remembered that afternoon, when Caleb held Isla, his sleeve riding up, revealing that same emblem. "It's you," Gordon whispered. "It's really you." But why was a war hero working as a janitor at North Star? Why endure humiliation, mockery, without saying a word. He thought of the way Caleb looked at aircraft, not with a civilian's admiration, but with the longing of someone who once belonged to that sky. The next morning, Gordon arrived at the plant early. Dawn light seeped through the hangar. Most employees hadn't clocked in yet. He spotted Caleb mopping the floor near the assembly line. "Caleb," he called softly. Caleb looked up, startled. "Mr. McLeod?" Gordon approached, voice low but firm. "I need a private word with you." Inside a small empty conference room, Gordon closed the door and turned around. "Captain Hartley," he said. "Or should I say, Greyhawk Lead." Caleb froze. His face paled, his hands clenched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Greyhawk Squadron, Afghanistan, escorting the humanitarian convoy through a sandstorm. You saved 4 men from certain death. And then you vanished from the records." Caleb turned away, staring out the window at the sky fading from gray to pale orange. From the nearby airfield, a training jet took off. "That man's dead," he said hoarsely. "Died in the desert, along with his career." "But you're still here." Gordon stepped closer. "Why haven't you told anyone? Why live like this?" Caleb turned back, eyes red. "Because I have an 8-year-old daughter who needs 3 meals a day. Because the veteran's pension couldn't cover my wife's hospital bills before she died. Because every medal in the world can't buy milk for my child. And because I'm done with people looking at me with pity. I don't need anyone telling me, 'You're so brave,' when they have no idea what loss really means." Gordon nodded slowly. He understood. He himself had survived a helicopter crash in the 1980s that left him with a permanent limp. He knew what it felt like to be seen as a man no longer whole. "I won't tell anyone," Gordon said. "But there's something you should know. Edward Sinclair, Charlotte's father. You remember him, don't you? You saved his life 15 years ago." Caleb stiffened. Sinclair. Edward Sinclair. "The test flight in Afghanistan. Mechanical failure. He would have died if you hadn't guided the plane down through the storm. You refused the medal. Just said, 'I was only doing my job, sir.'" The memory hit. The silver-haired man. The grateful eyes. "You saved my life, young pilot," he had said. "I'll never forget it." "Edward Sinclair passed away 6 months ago," Gordon continued. "His daughter, Charlotte, runs the company now. She's not an easy person. She's trying to prove she deserves that chair." "By stepping on everyone else," Caleb said bitterly. "Maybe," Gordon sighed. "Or maybe she's just afraid. Afraid she's not good enough. Afraid to fail." Caleb looked him in the eye. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you and she are more alike than you realize. You both fell once. You're both trying to rise again, just in different ways." Gordon placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You saved her father once. Maybe one day. You'll save her too." Caleb said nothing, but something shifted inside him. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Even though Gordon kept silent, rumors began to spread. Tessa Reed, a 28-year-old engineer known for her curiosity, accidentally overheard the tail end of Gordon's call with an old colleague. "Greyhawk. Yes, I'm certain. He's still here." "No, I won't say anything." Tessa followed the clue. She dug through old articles, military forums, declassified archives. She found a 2010 report, partially redacted, naming a pilot. The Greyhawk Squadron conducted a high-risk rescue mission under extreme weather. Captain, redacted, remained behind to ensure the safety of his team, resulting in redacted, recommended for the Silver Star. She cross-checked the dates. They matched the time Caleb had mentioned his injury. Then she watched him. The way he moved, methodical, precise, like a man trained by the military. The way he looked at aircraft, not with distant admiration, but with intimate knowledge. Tessa whispered to a few close colleagues, and rumors spread like wildfire. They say the janitor used to be a pilot. No way. If so, why's he working here? Maybe he was injured. Can't fly anymore. I heard he once saved someone really important. During a strategic meeting, Charlotte overheard the murmurs. While she presented the next quarter's financial plan, one middle manager leaned over and whispered to a colleague. She caught two words, janitor and pilot. Charlotte slammed her palm on the table. Are we discussing strategy or gossip? The room fell dead silent. Ms. Sinclair, the director stammered, we just heard that. I don't care what you heard, Charlotte cut in sharply. This is a corporation, not a Hollywood movie. Get back to work. That night, however, alone in her office, Charlotte couldn't shake the thought. She opened her father's desk drawer, the one she'd never touched since he died. Inside were old papers, pens, a stopped watch, and the photograph. The same one she'd seen 100 times, yet never looked at. Her father stood beside a young pilot. The pilot's face was blurred by motion, but the badge on his chest was clear. Grey Hawk Squadron. Charlotte lifted the photo under the desk lamp. The pilot's stance, tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly straight. She thought of Caleb, the way he stood, even with his injured back, the way he looked at planes, the way he held his daughter, with the gentleness of a man who'd seen too much violence. No, it can't be, she whispered. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was beginning to grow. Friday, the big day. Aquila, 9, the project on which North Star had staked its entire future, would be demonstrated before the Pentagon delegation, Senator Graham Caldwell, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, representatives of 3 rival defense corporations, 15 international journalists. This was Charlotte's moment, her chance to prove she deserved her place, to silence every doubt, to show the world that North Star had not weakened after Edward Sinclair's death. She had spent 3 months preparing, checking every detail, rehearsing her speech dozens of times. Failure was not an option. But at 9 a.m., during the final systems check before 0 hour, something was wrong. Inside the Everett test control room, data streamed across the large monitors. Gordon MacLeod stood before the main console, his brow furrowed. Combustion chamber pressure is unstable, he said, fluctuating between 850 and 1100 psi. It should be steady at 950. Tessa Reed scanned her tablet. Temperature spike, 2800 Fahrenheit for 3 seconds, then dropped to 2400. Charlotte entered, black suit, hair in a tight bun, eyes sharp as blades. What's the problem? The engine's unstable, ma'am, Gordon answered. We're not sure why. Triple-checked everything. On paper, it's perfect. Then find what's wrong, Charlotte said coolly. The demonstration starts at 2 p.m. We have 5 hours. Ma'am, if we can't isolate it, we recommend postponing. There is no postponing, Charlotte cut in, voice like ice. Postponing is shooting ourselves in the foot. The press will tear us apart. Competitors will use it to win the contract, and the board will vote me out. She looked directly at Gordon and Tessa. Find the cause. Fix it. Now. The room turned into a beehive in chaos. Engineers rushed about, checking every valve, every sensor, every fuel line. Keyboards clattered. Technical arguments ricocheted off the walls. About 30 feet away, Caleb was mopping outside the control room. The commotion made him look up. Through the glass, He saw the schematic of the engine spread across the big screen. He froze, stared. The diagram looked familiar. In all his years flying, he had studied countless schematics, F-16s, F-18s, F-22s, different in detail, but sharing silent rules of structure. And he saw it immediately. The second exhaust valve. It was reversed. On the diagram, the arrow showed the proper flow direction. But memory flickered. Yesterday, while cleaning near the assembly area, he'd seen 2 technicians install that valve backwards. He'd said nothing, assuming they knew what they were doing. They hadn't. If the engine ran with the valve reversed, a pressure feedback loop would form. At ground level, it would only cause instability. At 20,000 feet, where air pressure dropped, it would explode. Caleb knew that. In 2008, he had watched a similar engine blow during a training flight. The pilot had barely ejected in time. If that happened today, during a live demonstration, with an audience nearby, he hesitated. If he spoke up, they'd ask how he knew. He'd have to explain. His identity would be exposed. He'd become the center of attention, the thing he hated most. But if he said nothing, people could die. He thought of Isla, of Sarah, of his Greyhawk brothers, of the oath he'd sworn upon joining the Air Force to protect and defend against all enemies. Caleb set the mop aside. He stepped to the control room door and knocked. Gordon turned, surprised. "Caleb." "I'm sorry," Caleb said, his voice hoarse, trembling. "But I think I know what's wrong." The room went silent. Every eye turned to him. Charlotte spun around, fury flashing. "What? You think—" "The second exhaust valve," Caleb said firmly, pointing at the monitor. "It's installed backward. I saw it yesterday. Flow directions reversed, causing a pressure feedback loop." Tessa frowned. "Impossible. We checked." "You checked the schematics," Caleb interrupted. "But you didn't compare them to the actual assembly. Go to the floor. The valve's reversed." Gordon looked into Caleb's eyes, saw the certainty, remembered their conversation the morning before. "Check it. Now." 2 technicians sprinted toward the assembly bay. 3 minutes later, the radio crackled. "Mr. McLeod, he's right. The valve's backward. We don't know how—" Charlotte froze. Her face blanched slightly. She looked from the screen to Caleb. "If it's reversed," she asked slowly, "what happens?" "On the ground. Oscillation," Caleb said. "At 20,000 feet and up, it explodes. Catastrophically." She swallowed hard. "And how do you know that?" Caleb didn't answer. He simply met her eyes. Gordon broke in. "He's right. We need to fix it. Immediately. How long will it take?" Charlotte turned to the tech team. "Minimum 6 hours, ma'am. We'll have to remove and reinstall the entire exhaust system." Charlotte checked her watch. "We have 4.5 hours before the guests arrive." "Ma'am, if that's not enough time, we recommend—" "Do it," Charlotte ordered. "All hands, work in parallel. I'll delay the delegation 2 hours. Final safety verification. But that engine will be ready." The team scattered like a breaking wave. Through the glass, engineers climbed the scaffolding, dismantling the exhaust cluster with the speed of people who knew every bolt by heart. Inside, only Charlotte and Caleb remained. She stepped closer, her voice tight as a drawn wire. "You just saved this demonstration. Possibly lives. Why?" Caleb looked outside, watching the engineers move beneath the white lights. Doing the right thing doesn't need a reason. Charlotte studied him for a long moment. In her eyes, suspicion tangled with something else. Curiosity, maybe even respect. "Who are you?" she whispered. But Caleb had already turned away, walking out to pick up his mop again. 2 p.m. The North Star hangar in Everett was packed to capacity. The Pentagon delegation, 5 generals in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, occupied the front row. Beside them sat Senator Graham Caldwell, a man in his 60s with perfectly combed silver hair and a polished politician's smile, tapping notes onto his tablet. Behind them, rows of journalists lined up with cameras and microphones. Representatives from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and BAE Systems, North Star's fiercest rivals, watched with skeptical expressions. North Star's engineers stood on both sides, exhausted but proud. They had done it, reinstalled the valve in 5.5 hours, triple-checked every system. Everything was perfect. Charlotte stepped up to the podium, charcoal gray suit, hair loose and softer than usual. She didn't smile, she rarely did in business, but her voice carried, firm and clear. Today, North Star Aeronautics proudly presents Aquila 9, a breakthrough in jet propulsion technology. Fuel efficiency up by 23%, thrust increased by 18%, and unmatched performance under extreme conditions. She paused, scanning the audience. And, more importantly, this is an engine built with safety as its top priority. Every component inspected 47 times before installation. Every system equipped with triple redundancy. She gave a nod. The curtain drew back, revealing Aquila 9 on the test stand. A gleaming mass of metal under the floodlights, exhaust nozzle aimed toward a massive soundproof chamber. The audience applauded politely. Cameras flashed. "And now," Charlotte announced, "we will proceed with the full-power demonstration." In the control room, Gordon MacLeod placed his hands on the keyboard. "Ready, ma'am." "Start the sequence." The engine roared to life. A low hum rolled across the concrete, deepening into a thunderous growl. A blue-orange flame surged from the nozzle, beautiful and terrifying. Temperature rising. Thrust rising. Every number on the screen exactly where it should be. The audience leaned forward. Senator Caldwell took notes. The generals nodded. Cameras rolled. 30 seconds. 60. 90. Everything perfect. Charlotte exhaled lightly, glancing at Gordon. He nodded back. Then the pressure gauge spiked. "Combustion pressure rising!" Tessa screamed from the control room. 1,200 psi! 1,350! 1,500! "Cut the fuel!" Gordon shouted. Too late. A muffled pop echoed from within the engine housing. Smoke belched out. The flame turned, no longer blue, but red, then dark orange, then black. Warning lights flashed across the console. "Fuel leak!" Tessa yelled. "Cooling system overload!" The engine shuddered on the stand. A pipeline burst, spraying fuel across the floor. Fuel met red-hot metal. Fire erupted. The audience screamed. People jumped to their feet, stumbling backward. Security rushed forward, shouting, "Evacuate! Use the emergency exits!" But the sprinkler system lagged. The fire crawled along the fuel trail like a living creature. Then, a second explosion. Larger this time. The entire hangar trembled. The test rig tilted. Peter Shaw, a 26-year-old engineer only 8 months on the job, was too close. A steel beam collapsed sideways, pinning his leg. He screamed, struggling to pull free. The flames crept closer. 3 meters. 2. "Help me! Somebody help me!" Security tried to reach him, but the heat was unbearable. They fell back. Gordon shouted into the radio, "Activate emergency suppression! Now!" The system was dead after the blast. At the far end of the hangar, Caleb was crouched behind a steel column, shielding Isla. He saw Peter. He saw the fire. He saw the terror on the young man's face. And he saw the past. Afghanistan. The sandstorm. Lieutenant Reed trapped in a burning jet, while Caleb ran through flames to drag him out. They both lived. Caleb paid the price, with his spine, with his wings, with his career. Now, if he ran in again, he could be hurt worse. He could die. He could lose the ability to care for Isla. But if he didn't, Peter would die. Caleb looked down at his daughter. Isla, stay here. Don't move. Dad, don't! But he was already running. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, blasting a path through the flames. The heat slammed into his face. Smoke filled his lungs. Still, he pushed forward. He reached Peter. The young man looked up, eyes red with smoke and tears. Please, help me. Caleb dropped the extinguisher, gripped the beam, and lifted. Pain ripped through his back like lightning. His spine screamed. He roared, but didn't let go. The beam shifted, just enough. Peter pulled his leg free. Go! Caleb shouted. Peter stumbled to his feet, limping toward the exit. Caleb turned to follow, but his back seized. His legs buckled. He fell hard to the floor. The flames crept closer, a meter away. Then, Gordon MacLeod and Tessa Reed appeared, each grabbing an arm. They hauled him up, dragging him out of the inferno. At last, the emergency system kicked in manually. White foam poured down like snow, smothering the flames. Thick black smoke filled the air. They laid Caleb on the floor outside. Safe now. He gasped for breath. Drenched in sweat, his back burning with pain. His work jacket had torn from shoulder to sleeve when he'd lifted the beam. And there it was, exposed to everyone. The tattoo. 2 steel wings. The words, Greyhawk Squadron. The ink still sharp. Unmistakable. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Some journalists who hadn't evacuated froze, then, all at once, raised their phones. Click. Click. Senator Caldwell stepped forward, staring at the tattoo, then at Caleb's face. Greyhawk, he whispered. You're Captain Hartley? Caleb didn't answer. He closed his eyes, spent. Gordon knelt beside him, then looked up and said loud enough for everyone to hear, Everyone, this man is Caleb Hartley, former fighter pilot, Greyhawk Squadron. He saved 4 lives on a mission in Afghanistan, 2010. A true hero. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. A few feet away, Charlotte stood frozen. In her mind flashed the photo in her father's office, the young pilot standing beside him. She stepped forward, kneeling beside Caleb. You saved my father, she whispered. 15 years ago, in Afghanistan. You were the one. Caleb opened his eyes, met hers, and gave a faint nod. Charlotte's throat tightened. Every word she'd said to him, every way she'd treated him. It all came crashing back. I didn't know, she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know. Caleb managed a breath. Now you do, he said, and then went limp. Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston, emergency ward. Caleb lay in the hospital bed, a painkiller fee dripping into his arm. The doctors said he was lucky. The spinal injury hadn't worsened, and he'd recover after a few weeks of rest. Isla sat close beside him, clutching his hand, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Dad, don't ever do that again, she whispered. I was so scared. Caleb smiled weakly. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I couldn't let someone else get hurt. You always save people, she said softly. But who's going to save you? The question hit Caleb like a stone. He had no answer. The door opened. Charlotte walked in, carrying a bouquet of flowers. She looked different. No business suit, just a soft sweater and jeans, hair down, no makeup. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "May I come in?" Caleb nodded. Charlotte placed the flowers on the table and pulled up a chair. She glanced at Isla and smiled gently. "You must be Isla, right? You draw beautifully." Isla nodded slightly, still shy. Charlotte turned to Caleb. "The doctor said you'll be fine, but you'll need to rest." "I know. You don't have to worry about work. You'll keep getting paid, and we'll cover all your hospital bills." "That's not necessary." "Please," Charlotte interrupted, her voice trembling. "It's the least I can do. After everything you've done, for my father, for my company, for Peter." Caleb looked at her. "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything," Charlotte said. "My father lived 15 more years because of you. I had a father for 15 more years because of you. And today, you saved a young engineer's life. You saved the company's name. You saved all of us." She stopped, wiping tears from her cheeks. "And I treated you like garbage." Isla looked at Charlotte and said quietly, "You made my dad sad." Charlotte nodded at her. "Yes, I did. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to both of you." "Why did you treat everyone that way?" Isla asked directly, with a child's blunt honesty. Charlotte was silent for a long moment, then answered, not as a CEO, but as a human being. "Because I was afraid. Afraid I wasn't good enough. Afraid people would think I was weak. I thought if I stayed tough, if I never let anyone get close, I'd be safe." "But did you feel safe?" Isla asked. Charlotte shook her head. "No, I just felt lonely." Caleb spoke. "Mrs. Sinclair, I understand. After I was injured, I built walls around myself too. I pushed people away, thinking that if no one saw my pain, maybe it wouldn't be real." "But it still hurts," Charlotte said softly. "It does," Caleb nodded, "until I realized weakness isn't a sin. Falling down doesn't mean failure. It just means we're still human." Charlotte looked at him, tears glistening. "How do you do it? How do you stay kind after everything you've lost?" "Because of my daughter," Caleb said, glancing at Isla. "She needs to see that even when her father falls, he can still stand back up. Even when he loses his wings, he can still help others fly." Isla threw her arms around him. Charlotte watched them, and something inside her broke open. The wall she'd spent years building, made of coldness, distance, and ruthless perfection, finally cracked. "I don't know how to come back," she whispered. "How to be kind again, after I've become this person." Caleb smiled faintly. "One step at a time. Start with one kind act, then another, then another." "Will you help me?" she asked. "We'll help each other," Caleb said. Wednesday. The North Star hangar was under repair after the fire. Caleb had been cleared to return for light work. Isla came along, but this time Charlotte had arranged a safe corner just for her. A small drawing table covered with colored pencils and sketch pads, well away from the hazardous zones. Charlotte even spent 20 full minutes sitting beside Isla, watching her draw. "What are you drawing?" Charlotte asked. "Our family's airplane," Isla said. "It has seats for Dad, for me, and for you." Charlotte's throat tightened. "Thank you." Then the accident happened. A frayed cable on the overhead rig, weakened by the previous fire but never inspected, suddenly snapped. A metal hook swung down, striking a toolbox near Isla's desk. The box toppled, tools scattering. Startled, Isla stumbled back. Her foot caught a loose plank. She fell hard. Her wrist hit the concrete with a sharp crack. Isla screamed, a sound of pain and terror that froze the entire hangar. Charlotte, 10 meters away, holding a set of design plans, didn't think. She just ran. She reached Isla before Caleb, who was on the far side of the hangar. Charlotte dropped to her knees, wrapping the girl in her arms. "It's okay," she whispered, voice shaking. "I'm here. I'm right here." Isla sobbed, clutching her wrist. "It hurts." Charlotte checked it gently. Swollen, possibly fractured. Her hands trembled. "I'm sorry," she said over and over, her voice heavy with guilt. "My fault. I should have checked that cable. I should have made sure you were safe." "It's not your fault," Isla whimpered, but Charlotte shook her head. "It is. It's my fault. My responsibility. And I failed." Caleb ran up, breathing hard. He saw his daughter in Charlotte's arms, the CEO holding Isla like something precious. "Isla!" "Dad." She reached for him. Charlotte didn't let go right away. She looked up at Caleb, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect your daughter." Caleb knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. It was an accident. But this is my company. My responsibility. And you're here," Caleb said softly. "You got to her before I did. You took care of her." Charlotte looked at him, then at Isla, and realized, for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about her company, her reputation, or her power. She was thinking only about a child who was hurt and needed comfort. The ambulance arrived. The medic examined Isla. Severe sprain, not broken, needed an X-ray and a brace. "I'm coming with you," Charlotte said. Caleb blinked in surprise. "If you don't mind," she added, "I want to make sure she's okay." "You don't have to." "I want to," Charlotte insisted. And so they went together, Caleb, Isla, and Charlotte, riding the ambulance to the hospital. On the way, Isla held Charlotte's hand with her uninjured one. "Are you ever scared?" Isla asked. "Scared of what, sweetheart?" "Scared when everything hurts." Charlotte nodded. "Yes, I'm always scared." "Dad says being scared is okay, as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what's right." Charlotte looked at Caleb. He gave her a gentle smile. "Your dad's a smart man," she told Isla. "And you're brave, just like him." Isla smiled through her tears. "And like you, too. You're brave, too. You just needed time to remember." Next Monday. The main conference hall at North Star headquarters, Boston. The press conference was scheduled. Reporters packed the room. Everyone wanted to know about the fire, about Aquila 9, about the anonymous pilot who saved a life. Charlotte stood at the lectern. Today there was no rigid suit. She wore a simple navy blazer, more human, more grounded, hair loose, and for the first time in her career, she let emotion show on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice no longer cold, "today I stand here not only as the CEO of North Star Aeronautics, but as a person who has made mistakes." The room fell silent. 6 months ago, when I took over after my father passed away, I believed that to lead, one had to be tough, flawless, never weak. She paused, drew a breath. I was wrong. I treated employees like numbers. I fired people without thinking about their families. I insulted a man I later learned had saved my father's life. Cameras flashed. Pens raced over notepads. Caleb Hartley is a war hero. He served in the Greyhawk Squadron, saved 4 men on a mission in Afghanistan, and paid for it with his flying career. He saved my father 15 years ago. And last week, he saved our engineer from the fire. Charlotte glanced toward the back of the room, where Caleb stood, unwilling to take the stage. She gave a faint smile. "But when he worked for us, I treated him like trash. I insulted him. I insulted his daughter. I did it because I thought my position allowed me to look down on others. Her voice trembled. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I apologize to Caleb Hartley. I apologize to Isla. I apologize to every employee I've hurt. She wiped away tears, something she would have called unforgivable weakness 6 months earlier. A person's worth isn't in their title. It's in how they treat others. I failed, but I will learn, and I will change. She looked straight into the cameras. Starting today, North Star is establishing the Greyhawk Fund, a scholarship program for employees, children, and for the community, creating access to aviation education. We're building a training center where children from every background can learn to fly. She turned to Caleb. And I'm inviting Caleb Hartley to serve as director of the fund and aviation safety advisor. Not because he's a hero, but because he understands what service means. Applause filled the hall. Caleb didn't step up. He spoke from where he stood. I thank you, Ms. Sinclair. But I don't need a title. I just need a classroom, where kids like my daughter, who can't afford flight school, can come and dream. I'll teach for free. That's the legacy I want to leave. Charlotte nodded, smiling. Then we'll build it. Together. October, the following year. Everett, Massachusetts. The new Greyhawk Fund facility stood beside North Star's main plant, a modern, warm, 2-story building with wide windows facing the runway. Inside were classrooms, aircraft models, flight simulators, an aviation history library, and a special room where veterans taught skills to the next generation. A bright Saturday morning. The opening ceremony was modest. North Star staff, local families, a few reporters, and 50 children from underserved Boston communities. Isla, now 9, her wrist fully healed, stood on a small platform holding an oversized pair of scissors. Beside her, Caleb wore a white shirt and slacks, no more janitor's uniform, and Charlotte wore a sweater and jeans, hair down and natural. Ready? Charlotte smiled. Yes, ready? Isla cut the red ribbon. Applause broke out. The kids cheered and rushed in to explore. Caleb watched with a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Warmth filled him, not the old longing for the sky, but the joy of helping others reach it. Charlotte stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Thank you, she said softly, for teaching me how to fly again. Caleb looked at her. I didn't teach you to fly. I reminded you that wings aren't just for flying high. They're for lifting others. And now we're lifting them, Charlotte said, watching the laughing children. A boy of about 8, in a worn shirt and scuffed shoes, ran up. Sir, can anyone learn to fly? Caleb knelt to eye level, the movement he'd practiced with Isla. Anyone with a brave heart can learn, and you've got one. I can see it. The boy grinned and ran off to join his friends. Tears filled Charlotte's eyes, this time tears of joy. My father would be proud, she whispered. He already is, Caleb replied. He raised a daughter strong enough to recognize her mistakes and change. That's the greatest legacy. That afternoon, as the children went home with scholarship applications and bright smiles, Caleb and Charlotte stood in front of the building, watching the sunset. In the distance, on the runway, the refurbished F-47 Phantom Strike lifted off, its fuselage painted with the Greyhawk steel wings. Do you miss it? Charlotte asked. Flying. Every day, Caleb admitted. But now I've found another way to fly. Through these kids, through my daughter, through the people I help. And through me, Charlotte said softly. You helped me fly again. Caleb turned to her. We helped each other. Isla ran out, holding a fresh drawing. "Daddy, look." Caleb knelt. On the page were three figures, a man, a little girl, and a woman, standing beneath a plane in the sky. Beneath it, she'd written in slanted letters, "The Flying Family." "It's beautiful." "Honey," Caleb said, hugging her. Charlotte knelt too, brushing a fingertip over the drawing. "May I keep this one?" Isla nodded. "Yes, because you're part of my family now." Charlotte hugged Isla, tears spilling over. "Thank you for a second chance." The three rose, hand in hand, watching the sky shift from orange to violet. Caleb thought of Sarah, of the Greyhawk pilots, of what had been lost and what had been found, and he realized he had never truly lost his wings. He had only learned to use them differently, to lift others, to shelter dreams, to build a legacy not in the sky, but in the heart. "Daddy," Isla asked, "will I get to fly for real someday?" Caleb looked at his daughter, then at Charlotte, the woman who had learned to land from loneliness and to fly again on kindness. "My love," he said, "you're already flying. And you'll fly higher than I ever did, because you fly with your heart, not just with wings." Isla smiled. Charlotte smiled. Caleb knew, dreams don't die when we fall. They wait for us to teach others how to take off. Above them, the first stars began to appear. On the ground, three people, once broken, once lonely, once emptied out, now stood together. They were whole, not because they were perfect, but because they had learned to love while still carrying their scars. Steel wings aren't only made of metal. They're forged from courage, sacrifice, and the hope that even when we can no longer fly ourselves, we can still help others touch the stars. Sometimes, the highest way to fly isn't to go up into the sky, but to lift someone else there. Real legacy isn't measured by your altitude, it's measured by how many people you help take off. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episodes. Tell me in the comments, which moment in the journey of Caleb, Charlotte, Isla moved you most? And what story from the world of aviation, the military, or the human heart would you like me to tell next? See you in the next video.